You are symbiotic or parasitic. You may need a support or you may think you will. Be your own support. Now, before we get to this video, let's do something a little bit more curious. And believe me, what he was showing before was extremely curious. I need to show this picture that, I'm going to be looking at some videos and all of the copyrights are covered in this, that this is for education and why we have these protections. Let's do something a little bit more curious. Full screen this, commentary coming. This is a plant. This is a support.
Something a little bit more curious. This is a bin in my lab, and this is a support. And you can see that how is moving for reaching the support. So I mean, this plant know exactly where the support is, where the pole is, and is trying to do all his best for reaching. I don't know if you can see, but the apex of the shoots already made a kind of hook in the right position, even if...
Now, if you aren't noticing the movement of these leaves, of how they're working this almost as if that famous Indiana Jones would be working his bullwhip. This is a flurry of motion, and it's reaching for something it should not know is there.
The plants didn't touch until now the support. And you can see also the movement. It's a wonderful movement. It's just, even in this case, just passive, just based on osmotic actuator. Look at the hook in the apex, and almost. Another try, and it's not enough. And you can almost feel, no, the effort. And look at the leaves now that they reach the support. How is much quiet, calm.
That's your first love in Christ Jesus, when you are symbiotic and realize that the art of biblical husbandry requires knowing the need for support. Support the life next to you, and thus you are supporting community. This was an example of a symbiotic. Now, this is a parasite.
This is a cuscuta plant. Cuscuta plant is a parasitic plant that need to find a host in a very short time before dying. And you can see how this plant is immediately directing toward the tomato plant and find it and parasitizing the tomato plant. Well, this is quite trivial. It's just a chemical driving the information to the plant. It's a volatile. But
Well, yeah, and now pay attention to this. It's going to parasite. It prefers the tomato. There's a wheat plant going to be shown next to it. It prefers the tomato. If the tomato is not there, it will attach to the wheat.
look at this case. This is the same plant that have to take a decision because it's in the middle between a wheat and tomato. And all the time is choosing tomato because tomato is much easier to parasitize.
The takeaway here is, how does it know? That's a tomato, that's a wheat. It's picking up sound and vibration.
But if there is no tomato, even wheat can work. Okay, and this is something simple. Let's have to see something a little bit more curious.
Okay, so excellent, right? The video I just showed you was from 4 years ago, and it's about the same as this one. There was a big thing about 4 years ago. Brains have neurons, but plants don't. So what's the problem? And this man here, who I think looks like Stephen King, Richard Powers, a famous author, won a Pulitzer Prize in 2019 about a book about a scientist that turns out to be that they're saying, he must have been channeling this woman's work, who really gets into, well, we think of intelligence as being brain supported evolutionary asset. Large or small, brains have neurons connected by synapses. It is this interconnectivity, or so it is believed, that engenders intelligence. But we have Richard Powers. He wrote a fiction book called The Overstory, and Monica, who reminds me of Sylvie Ianova from New Earth Channel in bringing out to the world of the conspiracy people, me and others, the whole wow, Anatoly Fomenko, what happened around the world, and then I, of course, tie everything to the Bible, and the rest is history. And that was in 2014, 2015. But by this time, people were doing the ayahuasca, and I had already done the vision quests with the peyote, getting deep in to the mycelium, much like the overview of the aspens that, the tree may be 70 years old, but that root bed is from creation. There's only really one aspen, and all aspens grow up from it. It's not mycelium, but it's a root ball. Plants have it. Plants didn't need an ark to be protected by Noah's flood. Let's listen in here.
Because then when I tell them how important this is, they may be giving us more money for us to continue to do this here at Dartmouth.
If you want the book plate,
there you go. That's my guy. We didn't even rehearse any of this. It's beautiful. So this is really an interesting story. If you read the book, you know about Betty Westerford, one of the characters in the book, right? Now, she is this very special.
Okay, so that's the background. They meet. This is her.
They were growing in the garden, and the basil plants, and I asked the same question that I used to ask when I was working with the animals. I've been trained as a behavioral ecologist, so I'm asking questions about why animals, or in this case plants, do what they do, and do they remember things? Do they learn about what they've experienced, and do they care? And so I started asking those questions with plants, and I also quickly realized that those questions were not questions that I was supposed to ask. And so I was like, oh, and why not? and so it became kind of a game of like, well, why shouldn't we ask this question? Isn't science supposed to be asked the very question that we don't know things about?
It kind of is hard to imagine that we all go through that too when we ask these questions about the Bible or the Trinity, and it's always just like, just believe us because we have the history to prove that. If you don't believe us, then that means that we're all wrong and everybody else has been wrong, and we can't have that. So, she's looking for the indigenous hope of why the plants are so smart. Why? Let's hear what the guy who wrote the book responds with.
They're there.
For now. Okay. All right. Richard, do you want to say a little bit about your book?
I will just say a couple of things. This is going to come across as terribly ageist, but an informal empirical measurement suggests that there will be at least a few people in this room who will remember a television commercial from the 1980s in which an actor famous for his role on one of the great hospital soap operas, came on to plug Vicks cough medicine with the famous line, "I'm not a doctor, but I play one on TV." And I'm sitting here listening to Monica saying, "I'm not a botanist, and I'm not a cognitive scientist, but I play them in a novel." And I've been doing that for a while with various professions over the years. Overstory is my 12th book, and I've been publishing for about 30.
And the timing couldn't be better 4 years ago, so that people now, there's going to be symbiotics and parasites who use this information in different ways.
Why aren't we doing this anymore?
We are doing this.
Well, you are, but most of us have lost this conversation.
Well, I guess it connects with exactly what Richard just mentioned, and I would, if you don't mind me, I would put a label to it. And I think what we're talking about is empathy. Like for a reader to enter into a book, you need to empathize with the characters. They need to become you in some form, whether you like them or not, but you become part of the book while you're reading it. And if the writer is good, it will pull you in, and you have no choice. And I guess that points to the fact that we are probably inevitably totally empathic beings. And so we can't even help it. You can try not to, but I think our default would be to empathize. And of course, we seem to be very good to do that with the people who we love, who are close to us. But it's just a matter of extending that to the wider world. Just literally change your mind about how you interact with the world, and we will not be doing some of the things that we are doing. It will be so simple. And I am going to read something from your book because it's appropriate. And I didn't plan this, but it's perfect.
Can I make some edits first?
No way. Let me do it like raw. If I can find it. I put a little doggy ear.
Isn't that cute? A doggy ear.
Here, as a scientist, I was like, that's it. In part of the story is like, the charcoal is like pressing on a wound. Improve forest health. It's written in italics. As if forests were waiting all these 400 million years for us newcomers to come cure them. Science in the service of willful blindness. How could so many smart people have missed the obvious? A person has only to look to see that dead logs are far more alive than living ones. But the senses never have much chance against the power of doctrine.
How about
Change
that?
your mind and the game is over.
Well,
this notion that the senses don't stand much chance in the face of the power of doctrine, I'm going to make a bridge from your plea for empathy to a first foray into this question of plant intelligence treated empirically. So there is a character in the book, Patricia Westford, who Marcella was talking about, who does bear remarkable resemblance to Monica's career. Incidentally, after she wrote me and I read her book, I just thought, oh my God, if you had just done this a year before, my novel would be so much better.
Okay, there's some good humility, and I appreciate you sticking with it, but this is important as their serendipity, their believing that I think it's true that this was possibly brought together. Who's symbiotic? Who's parasitic? I don't think that they really, I don't think a parasite thinks I'm being bad. I don't know. I just think that that's the way it is. I am right now counting on the Lord to try to, help me with this.
Is that we're being created by other trees, right? Now, once you know that, you have to think about a forest as a different kind of thing. And you have to think about cooperation as a component of the stabilization of ecosystems in a way that was broadly neglected for a long, long time as we.
And you can see this, you can read it. I don't need to link it. You can find it. They go back to we need to get back to the, indigenous thought, to become one with nature. We haven't been doing it right. They're hiding information from us.
Trin?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the typical, they don't have neurons, they don't have brain, therefore. And he's like, I'm missing the logic here. So no neuron, no brain, therefore plant cannot be intelligent. He's like, what does that mean? Who said a priori that intelligence requires neurons and brain? I mean, we might, maybe. We might do it that way, but again, who said that we are the golden standard? Who decided that? And of course, that also means that everyone else is bound to fail.
Yeah, so Richard wanted me to bring up astrobiology.
Just thinking of that.
and which is
Are
basically...
you guys reading each other's minds now?
I know, seriously, what is going on? It's non-verbal.
Form of intelligence.
Yeah.
This is also very fun when eternity is not on the line. You can. This is just a way that they want to make the world better. It's not that evolution's wrong. The life of a child is a beating heart of a human soul, started by the spark of life. But somehow we're going to make the world better. Does anybody else think this man is wearing a toupee and that he kind of looks like Stephen King? Kind of been bothering me.
And it's just so astrobiology, the study of life elsewhere, not on Earth, right? And if you guys may know that there is this thing called SETI, which is
You believe that? Because they always have that to fall back onto. Now, here, I just want to take a quick look at this video too, the unusual orbit circling our past. These globe people who want to bring out the question of something weird's going on, but he totally believes in the globe. We'll just introduce that.
And I go to a friend who's a genuine rocket scientist, and I put it to him, and he thinks for a moment, and he goes, sure, orbit over the equator. It's like, okay, yeah, that's a valid answer. If I'm going over the equator, and the Earth is turning, it doesn't matter what speed anyone's going, I'm always going to stay right over the equator.
Another 4 years
to
go.
Band at other angles. I need to have that. And for that, he can't give me an answer, and I can't find
So
a
he's
clear
just
answer on the
looking
internet.
at, for...
How strange is that?
What am I going to do about these orbits? I got to...
To a friend who's a genuine aerospace mathematician guy, and he points out that, there's only a certain number of categories of Earth orbits.
Wow. The low Earth orbit, medium, geosynchronous, geostationary, come on, highly elliptical, polar Earth orbits, go on.
So I start looking through these categories, and there's two of them that jump out at me.
And he goes through them, and this is, these are being introduced to millions of people, and I'm sure that he's not the only one out it.
An orbit that looked really interesting is called Molniya. Molniya is the Russian word for lightning orbit. This was developed by the Soviet Union in the early days of the space age. The Molniya orbit is highly inclined and very elongated, and it's timed so that it goes around the Earth in exactly half a day. And that gives it this amazing...
And these are how hard they're working overtime, to come up with these answers, so... Good job, Dr. Gilbertson. Let's see what else you asked.
Over the opposite side of the Earth from where I started. Another day goes by, I'm back to where I started in my orbit. The Earth has turned again. I'm back over the same spot. That seems promising, right? I'm getting really obsessed with this search. I get on the phone of the friend who's the aerospace mathematician guy, and he's really like, okay, crazy quest, good luck with that. Tell you what, there's a really great website called STK. You should go check it out because it will show you any orbit you want. Okay, I go to STK. I do my basic calculations. I put in my numbers, and I push the button. And there it is right before my eyes, a single ground path, circular Earth orbit.
And so he proves it to his friend. He's got this, it's amazing.
So now that I've got a name for it, I want to get back to my original quest. But for a brain like mine, and maybe like yours, you immediately think, well, what about a 3-day orbit? What about a 4-day orbit? What are their ground paths like? And yeah, it's all there. It's really interesting. I had to look. So I go back to my original search, and I'm fine-tuning the orbit. 31-degree inclination, set over a certain point.
Okay, now, and this is going to be, to some of you, very Shakespearean, and how he brings it back to Gaza and Michelle Gibson and these, oh, you think I'm kidding?
Point on the Earth. And I find it has a number of really interesting and unusual properties. One, the orbit stays outside of the Van Allen belts.
So that's going to be like, wow, now we've got this new thing, and maybe that will help some people say, well, yeah, the astronauts didn't know about the Van Allen belt, but luckily we had this crazy good orbit. Lucky.
The radiation belts that are out around here, around the Earth. And if you're an astronaut, you don't want to hang out in there. You can fly through it, but you don't want to be there. If you're electronics, you don't want to be in there either. You want to stay outside of them. So this orbit is outside of that. Second feature, it's also outside of the Earth's magnetic field all the time. So the magnetic field is inside of you.
Wow.
Third feature, it's always in the sun. It's an orbit that never crosses into the Earth's shadow. That's
So they've
streaming
got
away,
their
even
hope.
at the northern solstice, the most extreme tilt of the northern hemisphere. So what do we do with an orbit like this? Well, since we're always in the sun, how about make a superpower satellite?
Okay, so, it's like, wow, so much possibilities. But then he went crazy. They're like, oh no. Yeah, they want to send lights to the dark places of Earth that need more light, sure.
Or maybe
Check
there's
this
other
out.
uses. All right, but what about that website that got this all started? That fringe one that respectable scientists may not want to venture into? Well, it was this.
He's not saying it's aliens.
A researcher named Jim Allison noticed that a significant number of ancient sites around the world, some of the oldest, most mysterious structures, all line up on a single circle around the Earth, a straight line. When you put a 2-day orbit over this exact place, it's not an exact circle. It's got slightly a potato chip shape to it, but it lines up pretty closely. Let's hop aboard a 2-day orbit satellite and take a tour of all these ancient sites. We start over the most famous megalithic site, the Great Pyramids, with their mysterious chambers, hidden tunnels, and of course the Sphinx.
Well, how
A little
about
bit
that?
later, we cross the Sahara, we cross the Atlantic Ocean, we cross over the Amazon basin, and we come to Machu Picchu with its mysterious stone structures, and Ollantaytambo, and all the other ancient sites around Cusco. Then we fly past the plain of Nazca with its mysterious...
Yeah, but not really, but kinda. I get it. And that's what some people will do. It's like, hey, it's just weird no matter where this orbit would have flown over something weird, but this is weird.
etched drawings in the floor of the desert. Of course, we're 60,000 kilometers up, so if we want to see those shapes, we got to have a pretty good telescope. We keep going across the Pacific. 4,000 kilometers, we cross directly over Easter Island with its gigantic heads, the Moai figures. Actually, they're full figures that are buried down into the ground. Continuing on across the Pacific, we come back up over the equator. We fly up over Cambodia and the ancient temples of Preah Vihear and Angkor Wat. Continuing on up into Asia, we fly over India to Pakistan, to the site of Mohenjo-Daro, one of the oldest Western civilization locations, with its script that has still not been decoded because it's so old and remote from us. We continue on over the Middle East, past Persepolis, and the great buildings at Ur, and then we continue on over Petra, with its amazing stone structures dug into the walls. And then it brings us back to the Great Pyramids, right where we started. So obviously, not all ancient sites are on this circle. Stonehenge, the Wailing Wall in Jerusalem, all sorts of sites in China, Africa, Asia, Central America. But the sites that are on the circle have a lot of things in common. One, they have some of the largest stonework humans have ever done. Huge blocks that we wouldn't realistically try to move today. Two, the style of the stonework is precisely cut. They fit together. You cannot fit a knife blade in between some of these rocks. And then look at Easter Island in specific. The big Moai figures get most of the attention. There's hundreds of them. But there are also walls that appear to be some of the oldest things on Easter Island, made by humans. The walls are made of basalt, an extremely hard stone. They match the style of construction at Machu Picchu, 4,000 kilometers away.
Look, they are going to have their answers, and the Bible is going to have its. What about support? If you're a parasite, you're looking for support. I don't think you realize you're a parasite, but how do they work? Let's check it out.
The point about plants is that they cannot move, but actually they move a lot. There are passive movement in plants, like in this pine cone, the opening and the closing of a pine cone that has been used for the production of new passive materials, or this very nice Erodium sicutarium. This is a seed that you can see just with changing the humidity, it's turning, and use this ability to enter in the soil. And so it's like a spermatozoa. It works very well, and you can see that at the end, some of them are also able to enter in the soil. Now, what is amazing about that is that they do this without using any energy. So they have no muscles. Look, it was able to enter. So they use no energy. They have no muscles, and it's just the way the material is made that is amazing, that make possible these wonderful movements. Of course, there are active movements. Some of them are very fast, like in the case of the Venus flytrap. Dionea is a carnivorous plant. We know that it's a very fast movement. Many of them can be exhibited just by making a fast, the time-lapse, the so-called time-lapse technique. And so we can see this graceful movement, like in this case, this is a young bean. It's just 3 hours of time. It's not a week.
Once again, a little late, but I want to welcome you to Flat Earth Nation Golden Age Past. That's what it used to be called. Now it's called Mudflood was Armageddon, because the Mudflood was Armageddon. Don't let them tell you anything else unless they're willing to debate you in a fair and honest way. And something tells me, that this is 2 days old, probably shadow banned. Not enough pictures, but enough for you to hear this, and it's true.
Where many different people have planted or have sprouted seeds in water. There's wheat seeds have been used, and rice and so forth, where they were sprouted in water with different words written on different jars, producing completely different outcomes. And this is a reflection of intention as captured in a word and captured in water structuring molecules, and then, or structured water molecules, and then within those seeds and how these living organisms are responding to it. So for the discussion today, I'm going to read a section from one of Stephen Buhner's trilogy.
Okay, so there you go. We don't need to hear the reading, but you've all heard about that experiment, and something in your gut tells you it's probably true. I understand you're at a very important time in your life. We always are. sometimes, like when that Venus flytraps closed, you're you're waiting for something to happen, and it's going to, and you're going to find out if you're symbiotic or parasitic, and it's the Bible that's going to make the difference. It's been the true history. It's shown that we have a soul. The mycelium, the root balls of the aspen and other trees like it that grow, the myrtle tree that can grow in the side of a cliff, the competition between plants. When one makes it to a support and two plants were growing up, the other one will give up and, well, it returns to the soil, and it never really dies because none of us ever really die. We're going to live forever in some capacity. And the idea is to get as close to the light as possible. And if you feel symbiotic and you want to be a part of a community, the Lord will provide. The Art of Biblical Husbandry on this flat earth nation with its golden age past is something you need to consider, because the Mudflood was Armageddon. And I'm never going to tell you anything else, and neither are my friends. Why would we? We know through the Bible that there are always people called that have other people's best intention at heart. And we do. Amen. Hallelujah. Aho. Aloha. Arrivederci. Ciao. Sayonara. Nakame. Hasta la vista. Kayaman.